Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name's Graham Francis. I have a great title of Director of Continuous Improvement at Havering Sixth Form College, which scares the life out of me most of the times, because I seem to feel that it says that I'm responsible for everything at the college. And actually I'm not. I'm responsible for the improvement on the service side to some extent. But just before I go on to that, I've worked in education for over 28 years, which is the reason why I've got no hair left. And I began teaching initially at Barking College in the late 80s. In those days it was dictation and writing down what was said, and it's changed quite a lot since that time. I've worked at Havering Sixth Form College since the year 2000, initially as head of IT and computing on the academic side, managing that department. And we were almost ready to build a new building when the disaster of funding occurred, and we were one of those who, although we were shovel ready, planning permission in place, we didn't get the funding. But I was fortunate at that time that the person who was responsible for IT services and other areas of the college was put in charge of the project for the new building, and once the new building was going to be up, was going to retire. So he retired early and I got left with IT services to manage temporarily for a year to see if I could do it. And then full-time from then. My role now encompasses IT services, but also the cross-college project management. I have a new manager, a new assistant principal was employed last year, who had no public sector background whatsoever, entirely in the private sector, who walked into the college and within the first week was like, in our first one-to-one, we were like, what on earth do you do here? There's no form, there's no planning, no one seems to know what on earth's going on. Everyone works in a silo, everyone designs something, and there's no continuity in it. So his idea was to actually bring in this role of Director of Continuous Improvement, bring the big projects into one area, and actually put some judgment together. And one of those projects that we had already started on to some extent was DR, which I'm going to talk about now. For my sins, I'm also qualified in procurement, only by the fact that in the public sector we are fairly constrained by what we can and can't do, or what we should and shouldn't do in terms of procurement. And I realised that maybe the first £500,000 project that I did was probably completely against OJU, and maybe it wasn't the right way to do things. So I wanted to make sure that I actually knew roughly what we were doing there. So that's the college, quite nice and leafy. I assume everyone knows where Havering is. Hands up those who know where Havering is. Wonderful. Havering is actually one of the largest London boroughs, but it's the only London borough that doesn't have the name of the administrative centre as its name. So if I was to say Romford, and anyone who watched Chelmsford 1, 2, 3 way back in the 70s or 80s will know it's a holy place, and they didn't want to put a bypass through it. But Romford is the administrative capital, or the administrative centre. Interesting market town that doesn't have any sheep or cows in it anymore, has lots of stalls, and we have about 11,000 visits per day according to Wikipedia in the evening, and about 12,000 in the day. So there's lots of people coming in and out of Romford. Havering College itself is actually situated to the south-east of the borough, quite close to Upminster Bridge Station, which is fortunate for ourselves because we get a lot of our students from some of the inner city boroughs, such as Tower Hamlets and Newham. It's quite a large college. It's located on one site. The image that you just saw was actually taken of the bit which is just there. So that gives you an indication of the size of the college. 2,700 plus full-time students, who tend to be in at least once a day if they're good, and are using the systems as often as they can. It's Ofsted rated good currently. It's financially sound as well, which is quite good to say in these terms. And I'm very fortunate that we've had a history of good investment in IT. So what did we do? Well, our previous disaster recovery practice was probably very similar to what a lot of people are doing or what a lot of people have done. Disk to disk for short-term file recovery. Little Johnny loses a file. Can we find it? If we can we restore it? Not much consideration for actually using that as a main recovery practice. And then disk to tape for the actual business process. So not a very different model to what most people are familiar with. Weekly, monthly, annual. restored to a dedicated centre on a 5-year contract, which I would never enter into these days. 3 years is my maximum, which was due to end on the 5th of December 2015 and provided us with a facility for restoring the tapes and a 6-seat office space for 250 staff if we had a real disaster. We did have to put it in, well, I'll go on and later tell you why we had to put it in. At the same time, alongside this, we had a remote monitoring and patch management contract. The college itself is 8:30 till 4:30 Monday to Friday, and at that time was 8:30 to 2:30. Sorry, 8:30 to 4:30 Monday to Thursday, and 8:30 to 2:30 on a Friday. It was a nice place to work. And so we needed something which looked after the evening running, because we didn't have any evening running, no staff in the evening, and we needed things for the vacation periods, and we needed something in place for when we weren't actually operating. We'd already tried some cloud-based solutions. IP telephony was something which we'd put in place fairly early, so we could actually get rid of the system that we had. We probably had more copper in the ceiling than is found in some breakers yards, and we also looked at virtual learning environment, and we placed this. Our VLE Moodle was actually housed at ULCC, so it's in the cloud. We don't roughly know where it is, but we know it's out there somewhere. And that was in case we had an issue in college, and we could then revert back to that. The students could continue learning. So it all sounds good. It was working. Well, it appeared to be working, and then disaster struck. Now, I'm not sure whether this should be really subtitled, and how did I keep my job? Because the first disaster struck in June 2012. And I was woken up by a phone call at midnight. Well, I thought it was midnight, but it was 8 o'clock in England. I was in Las Vegas. I hadn't done I wasn't living on the profits of what had occurred. And I was very confused because I'd only landed that evening. So I didn't know what day it was, where it was, and there was someone on the phone phoning me saying, "Graham, we've had a break-in. And our network controller cards have been stolen." Now, our data center is a 6-rack data center, and the network controller cards were in the furthest rack from the door. And to get there, you had to walk past a pile of laptops which were being imaged, which stood this high. Now, I know what I would have stolen, but for some reason they went for the network controller cards. So we invoked disaster recovery. After 4 days' work, the tapes still hadn't been fully restored, so we went for a private cloud. We took the servers and the storage. Well, I didn't, I was still in Las Vegas. But they took the servers and the storage, put it into a site, and we had some VPN access to it. So in effect, our whole disaster recovery plan didn't work. So things went quite well, and then disaster struck again. 2 months later, August 2012. I was in Mallorca at this time. This was even better. I just arrived from the holidays. We were still working from the external location. Obviously, the college had no network for 2 months, but fortunately it was June to August and there wasn't much going on. The second break-in, they stole the replacement network controller cards. They were just getting the system back and running and actually planning to get the servers and storage back the following week, but it hadn't happened. So we were maybe fortunate in that case. This one resulted in a police chase. And the culprits were caught. They didn't know what they were stealing. They didn't know why they were stealing them, but they did end up in prison for a short while. And we've still not got down to the bottom of why they were stealing the network controller cards, because they weren't treating them in any reasonable way. They were actually just being taken, put into a rucksack or a large bag and thrown over a fence. So they weren't going to be used, although they're a high value item, they were of no use to anyone once we actually got the second lot back. So they were no use to anyone. So after that, we had some heavy investment in data center security. We've now got a triple lock strengthened door. We have 2 smoke cloak devices, and we've got motion sensors all over the place. And the bit I left off is we now have bomb-proof shutters. It's a nice place to work, but you have to get used to it. And then disaster struck. This is this year, June 2015. Now, this should really have had no effect on the college. We were using a secondary EVA disk storage for some disk-to-disk backup, just to use it in a way that we could get it from there. We lost 3 disks in that storage device over a 2-hour period between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Friday to Saturday when there's no one on premise.